Welcome, Jeremy, and welcome, Mike, and hopefully we'll get a couple more. This is the very last webinar of the entire quarter. So after next week, actually, officially, we'll be done with statistics. But after today, we're done with webinars. So this is the end for webinars. Let me tell you the plan today. The idea is we have chapter 13, which is ANOVA, also called analysis of variance, but those words can be misleading because it's just some math stuff. But ANOVA is a better way of talking about it. And it's a very short chapter. We're not going to do much with it. I'm just going to give you one example. Shouldn't take too long. And it's all about making comparisons of quantitative data, but when you have more than two populations that you're comparing. So that's the plan for the new material. And then after that, I want to talk about the final exam. And there's a lot to talk about the final exam. I'm going to show you a bunch of resources that will help you. I'll even kind of go over a little bit about the final exam. That's for final, and what to do, and kind of the rules and all that kind of stuff. So again, that's the plan. This is our last day of the entire quarter to have a webinar. That doesn't mean I'm not going to do any more things. Still going to answer emails. I'll be looking at the discussion posts and helping you in any way you need. So let me ask you, welcome, Cal. Any questions at all about anything? Any questions?
Are we still going to be able to take the final next week?
Jeremy, you might be talking, but I can't hear you if you are. Maybe you're not talking. Okay. Again, if your microphone's not working well, try typing the chat box is always a good idea. Will we have any issues with exam proctoring? So I'm going to talk all about that when I get to the final. So we're going to spend a good chunk of this hour just talking about the final exam. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and I think you all know that. So I'll mention that. But let's wait for the final exam questions. Let's wait until we talk about the final, because that's going to be everything at once. Okay. And so if there's no other questions, let me do the one example. And let me share my desktop. There we go. Okay, so again, I just have this one question, and we're going to have to work this out. So suppose a study was done to analyze the racial differences for the distance in miles that people live from the nearest public library. The data below, data from the study is shown below. And what we have is we have whites, blacks, Hispanics, and then others. And we have some data. Okay. How is this different from what we've already learned how to do in this class, which is a whole lot of different stuff? But what makes this one different?
You have 4 different data points to input.
Yeah, let's just call it, it's not quite 4 different data points, it's 4 different samples. Does that make sense? So it's 4 different samples. I think that's probably what you're thinking, right? So yeah. There's the sample for whites. So in a way, it's like an L1, an L2, an L3, and an L4. And we don't have any tests yet that handle that. Does that make sense? So there is a test, and it's called ANOVA. And what we're going to do is we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about that. So the first thing is there's a bunch of assumptions that you have to make to be able to do ANOVA. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So we have this data, and the question is, what assumptions must you make in order to perform the test? So let's pop in the assumptions. So I'm just going to write the assumptions. First one, and you can make it smaller. We're going to run out of room. The first one is, and we've seen this before, is that you really can't do any tests on quantitative data unless you have a normal distribution. Does that make sense? And can we guarantee it's normal based on sample sizes? Do we know this is normal? What do you think?
No, the sample sizes aren't large enough.
Yeah, in fact, the smallest sample size is 4. And hopefully you all know that 4 is way too small. So we must assume all the 4 distributions are normal, which is probably false. Does that make sense? Okay. The other one, and maybe I could have put this in number 1 because it's what we always do, is assume non-biased. So you have to have a non-biased study. You can do that with simple random sampling or really good stratified sampling without voluntary response bias, things like that. And that's true pretty much for everything we've done in this entire class. Is that clear? There's more though. So another one is the group's answers are independent of each other. Is that clear? So in other words, basically, you're not picking, you know, I don't know, like this group, this 15, 12, 9, and 18, they didn't come from the same little area, and the next one came from the same little area. These are just random people. That's usually pretty easy. Another one is that the sampling is done in the same way. Okay, so that's kind of the idea, is that you don't, you know, grab the blacks and ask them slightly different than you ask the Hispanics. You have to make sure that the questioning is done in exactly the same way for the 4 groups. That's usually no big deal. Any questions so far? And then finally, the standard deviations are the same. Any questions on the assumptions? By the way, the standard deviations are the same. That's a big assumption, and it's probably false, so you got to be careful about using ANOVA. If you have a large sample size with large sample sizes and they're all kind of similar, then you can be a little flexible on the standard deviations. But for different size samples, you got to worry a lot. Any questions on the assumptions to be able to use ANOVA? Any questions? Okay, just a note that these 5 assumptions are assumptions that you have to make on any ANOVA. Okay, that always has to be true. Now, if your sample sizes are large, like over 30, then the first assumption is not really an assumption. You know it's true, so it's not an assumption. The rest of them are usually an assumption. Any questions at all on this idea so far? Okay, so next, it says show all details of the ANOVA test. State your conclusion. So hopefully you know that since we're doing a hypothesis test, we need an H0 and an H1. And in this one, I think I'm going to brush it actually. Turns out for ANOVA, the easiest way to do it is H0 is in symbols. So H0 is that mu, the mean for the whites. So I'll go mu W equals the mu, or the mean, the population mean for the blacks. And that's equal to mu population mean for the Hispanics. And that is equal to mu the population mean for the others. So the idea is that the null hypothesis is that all the races are the same. Okay? There's really no difference in the number of miles that people live based on race. Any questions on that idea? Okay, now it gets a little confusing. That's H naught. Any guess on what H1 is? Any thoughts? So H naught is that they're all the same.
It would be that any of them are different.
What do you mean by any?
If either the mu, W, or any one of the samples are different, then H naught would be false. So
yeah, so notice, except that really it's any two. So it could be that two of them are the same and there's two others that are the same, but they're different from each other. Does that make sense? So maybe blacks and whites are the same, Hispanics and others are the same, but those two pairs are different from each other. Does that make sense? So the easiest way of saying this is in words, not in symbols. There are ways of doing it in symbols, but I found that no one really gets it. So I like to do it in words. And that is the population mean, or mean distance from the library is, okay, or are different for at least two of the groups, or the racial groups. Any questions on H1? Okay, so I want to give you a little kind of thinking about this. Chapter 13, H naught is in symbols, H1 is in words. Chapter 12 is always the same. H naught is rho equals 0, rho naught equals 0 for H1. Chapter 11 is all words. Chapter 10 and 9 are all symbols. You want to get that straight for the final next week. Got it? Any questions so far? Okay, now you're used to, what do you think the next step is? What do you usually do next in the hypothesis? Yeah, we enter the data, so we need our calculator. So now I'm going to go to my calculator. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to stat. And then I'm going to go to edit. I'm going to clear out all of my L's. So I'm going to clear out L1. I'm going to clear out L2. And I'm going to clear out L3. And L4 is already cleared, so I don't have to. Any questions so far? For L1, I'm going to put the white data. So 15, 4, and then we also have 11, and 9, and 3, and 2. For L2, I'll put the black data. That's 12. Missed. And then 1, 6, and 6 again. For L3, I'll put the Hispanic data. So that's 9, and then 17, and then 5, 14, 7, and 1. And for L4, I'll put the other data, 18, 11, 2, and 8. Any questions so far? Any questions? Okay, so the next step you're used to is we hit the stat button. And then we're going to go to tests. Definitely want to go the up arrow, definitely not the down arrow because that takes forever. Hit the up arrow once and we're there. And it says ANOVA. I hit enter. And then I'm just going to type second 1, comma, second 2, comma, second 3, comma, second 4, and that puts L1, L2, L3, and L4 into my ANOVA. And then close the parenthesis. Any questions so far? So you'll notice this is much easier than what you had to do in chapter 11 to do the calculator work. Then I just hit enter. Okay, they give you all kinds of stuff, but we don't need most of this. All we care about is, first thing, there's F. F is kind of like we've seen a t statistic and a z statistic and a chi-squared statistic. So F is a new statistic. Again, the math is way beyond this class, so we're not doing it. But you can trust me that there's a different curve that's F. Okay, P, I hope you know what P is. What's P? So what does P mean? Any thoughts on what P means?
It's the p-value for
Yeah, it's a
the data.
p-value, and that's what we've been doing all quarter, right? It'll go very badly on the final if you don't know what a p-value is. Okay, so the p-value is about 0.8. So now we can go back to the question. If the p-value is 0.8, what does that tell you?
In most cases, we're going to fail to reject.
In all cases, not most. Yeah. Remember that 0.1 is basically the largest p-value you'll ever allow, right? For rejecting. 0.8
Right.
isn't even in the ballpark of that. Yeah, all cases. So there is statistically insignificant evidence to make a conclusion whether or not, let me tell you the way you'll usually see this in research, and that is whether or not race is a factor in distance from the people live from the nearest library. Okay, you could also just say there's insignificant evidence to make a conclusion whether or not the population mean distance that different races live, that people live from the library differs by race. That's another way of saying the same thing. But you'll see this factor idea, I think, a little more often, so I figured I'd write that one in. Okay, are there any questions at all about ANOVA? Any questions? Okay, I want to mention a couple things. One, this is it. Okay, this is the last bit of statistics you're ever going to see in this class. So hopefully you agree this was a short chapter, is all there is to say. How would it be different, by the way, if our p-value is, say, 0.001 or something? What would be the big difference?
We would fail to reject, and then there would be.
No, not fail. If it was 0.001.
Okay, we would, sorry, reject and null hypothesis.
Exactly. And then you would say there is statistically.
There's significant evidence to conclude
that race is a factor. Do you see that? So it changes a few words, but not too much. Is that clear? So that's basically all there is to it. Okay, and that's ANOVA. But I want to mention something that's very important for your future, is that these assumptions 1 through 5, they're very deep. And so you'll think by the end of this course that you understand ANOVA, but you don't. Like for example, number 5, do you know how to tell if the standard deviations are the same? Right? These are population standard deviations, and all we got is a sample. And the answer is no. Okay, you have no idea. Okay. Also, how do you tell if distributions are normal or not? That's also very difficult. So there's a lot of difficult things involved in ANOVA that we do not do in this class. Instead, if you want to learn about it, what do you have to do?
Take a more advanced statistics class.
Exactly. You need to enroll in another class. And it's not because I'm lazy and I don't want to teach it to you. This is elementary stats. And I don't think I've ever seen any elementary stats test class that does any more than this. But advanced statistics, of course, you learn this stuff. Okay, and it's pretty deep. So right now, what I could tell you is that there's still a lot more statistics to learn that you haven't learned in the elementary statistics class. There's definitely lots and lots of statistics involved in different classes that you could take. And that would be if you get a master's, for example, then you'll probably be required to take a more advanced statistics class that focuses on whatever your degree is, okay, instead of just some general math class. Any questions on this before we say we're done? Any questions? Okay, if there's no questions, then I think I'm gonna say we're done. We're done with Zoom. We're done with not Zoom. We're done with Paint forever, because I'm not going to give you more questions to look at least that I answer, because now we've had all the material we need. At least you've had an example of every type of problem for this class. So what I want to do next is I want to talk about the final, and we're going to spend the last 40 minutes or so just talking about the final. I think I'm going to go to Canvas for that. Okay, so the first thing is the rules of the final are almost exactly the same as the rules for the midterm. So the idea is you get a proctor and you have 2 hours, you take the test on paper, you bring your calculator, and that's all there is to it. One difference is I allow, instead of a 3x5 note card, you don't get a 3x5 note card. Are you happy? Are you happy?
Yes, because we get an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper.
Exactly. You get a sheet of paper this size instead of a 3x5 note card. You can write on both sides. So you should be happy about it. Okay, so you get a much bigger piece of paper because there's a lot more material than just the midterm had. So it's up to you what you want to put on that paper. Obviously, you want to put the formulas on, but you can put a lot more than that because there aren't that many formulas in this class. So again, put whatever's going to help you. So that's one thing. There's another thing that's new, and it's something I've never dealt with in my life, and that is everything is closing. I'm sure you're all aware of that, right? So even our ski resorts up here are closed, which is ridiculous. But our ski resorts have closed. The good news is our college is open. So I don't remember exactly where y'all live. Jeremy, you're local, right? I think you were the local one. Yeah, and Mike and Caledon, where do you come from?
I'm down by Stockton. I'll be at MJC, hopefully.
Okay, are they open?
As of today, they are. I actually spoke to the proctor today. They are open as of today.
Oh, good. That's good to hear. Now, are they planning on closing?
They're planning on doing pretty much the same thing that LTCC is, and as far as converting everything to online.
But keeping the proctoring open? Yeah,
she said as of right now, proctoring is good for.
Oh, good. Okay. So I want to mention, I'll talk about LTCC. So Bishop I haven't heard anything about Bishop. So, I mean, I've stopped at Bishop. There's some great hiking, backpacking supplies at Bishop. Okay, right, they've shut down the schools here also, but our library has proctoring. So what you want to do is you want to see about your proctor and see if they still got proctoring. Count on. And if you can't, send me an email. So if you search around and can't find something, send me an email, and then we chat personally. Okay, that's the kind of one-on-one stuff, and I'll do what I can to make it work for you. But no guarantees of anything. But I'll do my best because we have to be flexible. But we'll try to make things work. Okay, so but again, there's only 3 of you here, but for the rest of you, note that. If you have trouble finding, so for example, there was one student, I don't mention names because there's privacy issues, where their proctor center is probably shutting down, and she was able to find, because the schools also shut down, she was able to find a K-12 teacher that was able to proctor for her, that was willing to do that. And I let that one work because that one, it was an official teacher. So again, sometimes there's creative things you can do. All right, so the other thing is, because I just talked to our president of the college, and right now we're planning on being open. Okay, I literally at 5:38 p.m. that's when I got the reply, because they didn't know. They had no idea what they were going to do. And what they're doing is they're planning on being open next week, but they're not committing. So my guess is that if the virus comes to Tahoe, then we'll probably close. But if it doesn't come to Tahoe, we'll stay open. That's my guess, but I can't tell you for sure. And of course, I have no idea if the virus is coming up here. The good news is very few people are up here because our ski resorts are closed. What's the point of coming to Tahoe in the snow if you can't ski? Okay, there might be some gamblers, I guess. Okay, yeah, Friday we're definitely open. That's almost an absolute guarantee, because Friday is my other finals. And boy, if they close down before Friday, we're screwed. Okay, because that means the whole college is going to have troubles instead of one class. But Jeremy, definitely Friday they're open. I know that for sure. And probably next week, but no absolute guarantees is what they told me. But they're hoping to be open. So they're looking to see what the cases are. Okay, it's kind of bad. I'm not afraid of the coronavirus, because I've looked at statistics, and it's very low in terms of the percentage of people who are healthy who die, and also even the percentage of people who get it is very low. But it doesn't matter. What I'm more afraid of is our whole country is shut down, and that causes all kinds of problems. So, we do what we have to do. So any questions about that part? I figured I'd just spend a little time talking about kind of all the scary news that we've been getting. Any questions? Okay, so now that we've talked about it, let me talk about the final itself. So this is your final. And by the way, this is page 1. You see it? Okay. Let me read page 1. It says, match the following hypotheses and estimates with the appropriate test statistic or confidence interval. And there's an I through XV, there's 15 of them, because that's how many different things we've done in our class. So page 2 is the one I'm not going to show so close, because that's all the lists of, so each one, what I will tell you, there's an A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. So it's not 1-to-1, by the way, because A through H is not 15. And I'm going to give you a scenario, and you're going to have to decide which test to use. And my opinion, that's the most important thing in the entire class. So I make it number 1. If you can't do that, you can't do anything, really. You don't even know where to get started, then forget it. So make sure you get that started. So let me scroll down a bunch. If you go to the very last module, which is comprehensive final, So first thing is we have very little due this week because I want you to study. Okay, we have chapter 13, which is a very easy chapter. Most people love it because it's so easy. There is the easiest discussion assignment, I think, of the whole quarter, maybe tied with the 2 truths and 1 untruth. And I know, I think, Cal, I think you actually typed some stuff in already. Do you agree it was easiest? I think you were the one that posted. There were a couple people that posted. It wasn't you. Who posted then? I forget. Somebody posted.
I know I posted. I'm pretty
It was
much
Mike
did
that
all.
posted.
Yep.
Was it the easiest of the whole quarter?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. If you don't get 10 out of 10 on it, you're just slacking. Because that means that you did it late and there's no reason to do this one late. Do you agree? You don't need to wait until you learn the material to do this one. So again, free points, take them. No reason not to. Jeremy also did it. Okay. Again, I checked a little while ago. I think there was only 2 that had done it. Okay, so that's the first thing, is that we have an easy week in terms of material assignments, because I really want you to spend your time on studying for the final and practicing for the final. So first thing, if you go to final exam structure, and you wait a moment, then do you see the problem 1? And then, oh, it should say A through H. I think I changed, I got rid of one of them. And then there's a 2. Problem 2 is true, false. Problem 3 is going to be hypothesis testing. You're going to have to ask about, I'm going to ask you about type 1 and type 2 errors, sample size, conclusions, test statistic, null hypothesis, etc. Problem 3 is you're going to have to do a write down the distribution, sketch the diagram, answer the question, determine if the normality assumption was needed. There's an A and a B. Where have you seen something like problem 4 before? Where have you seen something like this problem 4? Yeah, it was a midterm. So I strongly recommend going looking at the midterm. I posted a key. And if you do not have 4 things written on part A and 4 things written on part B, similar to the way I did it on my key, then I will take off points, just like I did in the midterm. So make sure you do that. Practice, 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 practice. Problem 5, I'm not telling you. It's just something from chapter 3, 4, 5. Problem 6 is the confidence interval question. Problem 7 is a hypothesis testing question. Problem 8, something from chapter 2, 3, or 4. Problem 9 is regression analysis. It asks you all the things in regression analysis. Problem 10, another hypothesis, and problem 12, and problem 11, another hypothesis. And that's the final. Okay? What I'm not doing is giving you all the details, but again, you have access to this. So if I went too fast for you, you could always look at it and take a look. Any questions? Any questions about the structure of this final exam? Any questions? Okay, if there's no questions, let me show you more resources. So again, this is one you should definitely look at, get an idea so there's no surprises, and then practice at least 3 or 4 problems from each of these. So let me show you the resources. So I did a lot of resources. One is review applets. And I think I have to click that. So you'll notice there's practice classifying statistics problems. We're at the end of the class, so how many of these should you practice? Which ones?
Looks like all of them.
Exactly. Select all. Hit submit. This is basically problem number 1. Okay, I mean, it's going to be a different paragraph. So there are a lot of these. How many of these should you practice? Any thoughts? Yeah, not all. All could take your whole life. There's hundreds of these, by the way, that I put in.
As many as you have time for.
I wouldn't even say that. I'd say as many, because remember, you gotta practice other kinds of problems too. So I say is that as many as you need to until you just start getting them right consistently. And if you get them right consistently, that means you've got it. Does that make sense? So let me just do this one. Are tourists on the North Shore more likely to rent a boat than tourists on the South Shore? 50 North Shore tourists and 50 South Shore tourists were surveyed. So we have to pick which of these is it. Any thoughts? I'll let you read through all of these. It's 15, I think. And, you know, it's okay if you get it wrong here. It's not okay on the final, but when you're practicing, it's fine if you get it wrong. Okay, Jeremy said chi-squared independence. Let's try it. Okay, it's not a chi-squared test. Please try again. So what I did is I added a little kind of AI-ish stuff that where if you try something, it'll guide you to what you need to do. So it's not going to be in these chi-squareds. So that one didn't work. So you read this and think about the survey question. The survey question is, will you rent a boat? Do you see? You're going to ask this tourist. And on this case, there are tourists in the North Shore. There are tourists in the South Shore. So it's two different populations that we're comparing. And it's a yes-no question. So that's going to be, and it's a hypothesis test, mostly because of the word are, right? Instead of estimating the difference between, we're actually fine. We just have to say, is it true or not? And that's a hypothesis test. So hypothesis test for the difference between two proportions, which is what Cal said. Let's try it. And that's it. For some reason, my happy face doesn't work anymore. It's weird how I don't change anything and then something goes away. So sorry about that, but it says nice work. So that's correct. Any questions on that? I'm not going to do 100 of these. We don't have enough time. But I want to show you how this works. And then you hit next question, and it'll give you another one, and another, and another. I found out, actually, this is my most popular applet of all the applets I've ever written. Because when our internet went down, I got emails from throughout the whole country saying, why did you turn off your applet? and I emailed back saying, well, we got 20 feet of snow and everything is down. There's an A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H, Jeremy, for this one. There's a bunch. Okay, that shouldn't matter at all how you study. Just study and get good at these is the idea. Okay, but if you don't, it won't go well for you, I promise. If you do, it'll probably go well if you get good at it. It should go well. Okay, any questions on the review applets? Okay, there's another review applet. True falses. And again, you select all and you try these. So I programmed a bunch of these in also. Let A be the event that a randomly selected student is taking a math class, and B be the event that the student is taking a statistics class. Are A and B dependent events? And should we say true or false? Then A and B are dependent events. True? Let's see. Yep, and it says true. And then, but don't just say true, I got it. Make sure you read the explanation in case your thinking was wrong. Any questions on the true falses? And again, I programmed a whole bunch of these. I wrote these in JavaScript, so they should work on any device. They should work on an Apple, on a PC, on a smartphone, whatever you got, they should work. Decent theory. Except for the happy face. I don't know why that's not working. I'll have to look at that.
Sorry, baby.
Yeah, that's supposed to have a happy face. For some reason that picture didn't show up anymore. Okay, any questions on this so far? Okay, those are the review applets. This is something, I never know whether this is okay to do or not, because I don't want to scare you. But what I did this about 5 years ago, is I cataloged all of my statistics questions I've used in my career for my tests. And I put those on a Google Doc, and now I share them. So make sure you're not afraid when you look at it, because I've been teaching a long time and there's a lot of them. So that's why it says large collection of past questions. And I think it's easier to do the external site piece. And it's taking a while because it's a big collection. One of these I'll update it and I'll add another 5 years and another 100 questions or something. So by the way, you'll notice that this is very long. It's still loading, almost done, maybe not. We're getting there. Almost there. Okay, there it is. 195 pages of questions. So if you're worried that there aren't enough practice problems, you have no worry. But again, don't let this get you stressed out. Don't do every problem because it's way too much time in your life to do all these. But you'll get to see a lot of different examples. Okay, any questions on that resource? Any questions? So what I didn't do is provide a key, because I don't want to provide a key. I want you to practice. And on the final, there's no key that you're going to be able to look at. So it's good to have a problem that doesn't have keys. If you want to work on problems that do have keys, there's a lot of options. Let me show you those next. So one is the practice final. So I create a little practice final. And that has a key. So here's a bunch of problems, and that has a key. It's a practice final. This is not 195 pages of questions. So it just gives you an assortment of some problems. It's not exactly the same as what you've done. This is an old test I gave many, many, many years ago. I figured I'd post it for y'all. So it's not exactly the same as our test, but there's some problems with a key. How are you going to find many, many problems with a key? What do you think? So where are you going to find many problems that have a key? I don't see y'all jumping in, but hopefully you know. I'll show you. Practice final has some problems with the key, but not many, many.
The applets.
The applets, yeah, but those are only true, falses, and the matching. Yeah, the textbook has a bunch. So the textbook have a lot of problems with key. But let me show you some others too. One is that if you go to, let's say you want to practice confidence intervals, then what you can do is just work on the assignment. So one is go to chapter 8, confidence interval assignment. And this is just for practice now, because you've already taken it, but you can always practice and you can do more, and there's lots and lots of questions, and you can try these and it'll tell you if it's right or not, and then tell you the answer. Okay, any questions on that? Okay, note these are multiple choice, but they're still good practice. So that's one place you can definitely find a key, is you can go to any of the assignments and those have keys. So for example, here's one here. Find the confidence interval. Or here's one where what I recommend is reading this first paragraph. Don't read ABC. Do what you know you're supposed to do, which is do a full confidence interval analysis. Then look at ABC and see if you've got the right thing. Does that make sense? So that's a suggestion on practicing. Okay, another place where you'll find a key, which you may not have even thought of, but it's really helpful. Could even jump to the confidence intervals again if you want. If you go to the discussion posts, and if you go to my model, you're gonna have to do a lot of writing on this final. And this gives an example of what I expect you to be able to do. So a big difference between, you know, the final and just the exercises is the final asks you to do a lot of writing, and you have to do the writing like we did on the discussion posts. That's one of the main reasons I have you do the discussion posts, because I want you to practice it so that you can do well on the tests. Any questions on that? Okay, so there's a lot of different resources for practicing for this final. And the other thing that I recommend doing is timing yourself. Okay, because unlike the homework and the discussion posts, it is timed. You only have 2 hours. So you'll run out of time if you spend too much time thinking about it. You should have practiced enough that you read a question and you just know what to write. And then you write it out, and then you should be able to finish in the 2 hours. But if you don't practice enough that you have to think a long time before you know what to write, you'll run out of time. Same thing, and not just for writing, but also like true falses, whatever, is that you only have so much time. There's 11 problems. There's 120 minutes. So that's around 10 minutes each problem. Okay, little less than 11 minutes. Any questions on this idea? Any questions? Okay, so again, there are a lot of different ways of practicing, and you definitely need to practice, and practice some more. Okay? You don't want to just let this one go, because let me show you something very important. And that is the grade. And the final is 30% of your course grade. So take it seriously. So let me just put it this way. The final exam is worth more points than all of the assignments and all of the discussions combined for that 1 2-hour exam. So take it extremely seriously, because it's a huge part of the grade. Any questions on that? As bad as that sounds, by the way, could be worse. My linear algebra class, their final is 65% of their grade. And that's because if you were if you were a face-to-face student, life is hell right now, because we're closing down and we had to cancel all kinds of stuff. So I had to throw everything on the final. So again, this is a great time to be an online student. I don't know if you realize that, but I'm on the statewide math board, and we had a meeting, and every single college except ours and Mendocino Community College that was represented in our meeting was closed to face-to-face classes already. We're closing next quarter. So I know, I think Jeremy, you're an LTCC student. I don't know if you're planning on taking more classes next quarter, but it'll be online. All our classes are going online next quarter because of this coronavirus issue. So again, be happy that you're an online student because things are a complete mess for everyone else. Okay, and that's everywhere, not just in Tahoe. So any questions at all about the final? This is a really good time to ask. Any questions? So let me remind you while you're thinking. So one more thing that you should all do, and that is go to week 8. What happened week 8? Can you remember? I know it was already 3 weeks ago, the midterm. So if you go to week 8, what I did is I posted the key. And that will give you some more examples that have a key to them, okay, with very formal posts, fancy keys. I even made beautiful pictures and stuff like that. It took a long time. But definitely, you know, look at that and make sure you know how to answer these questions. Some of the questions on the final, not all, are going to be very similar to the key, to this midterm, I mean. And some are going to be different. You know, the midterm didn't cover ANOVA, for example, or regression analysis, and the final does. So, you know, make sure you know how to do these kind of problems along with the newer stuff. Any questions on that? So one of the things is you'll notice there's a lot of resources. So I hope you're not overwhelmed, because I'm a believer in putting out a lot of resources, even though I know not all of you, none of you can look at everything, you know, in full detail. So what I've decided is look at what works for you. But again, definitely go to, I would even start at the structure, because that tells you, you know, very almost somewhat specifically what you need to work on. Okay, so that's kind of where you want to start with your practice. Let's go to the structure and then practice problem 1, practice problem 2. Okay, those are the applets that I wrote. Problem 3, make sure you know how to do hypothesis testing. Make sure you know how to state a conclusion. What are the first couple words in stating your conclusion? How does it start? First few words. Maybe first 3 words. See if you can tell me. It can be said, that's not usually, yeah, there we go, like a Mike wrote. There is statistically. And then it's either going to be significant or insignificant. So you know that. I mean, you can even put that on your note sheet if you want. Do it right. Does that make sense? I'm telling you now, that's how you start problem 3. Okay? Know what a type 1 and type 2 error are. And notice, by the way, I'm not asking for you to define them. I want the damage done. Errors cause damage. So I want to hear the damage. Who gets hurt? Does that make sense? Who gets hurt and why did they get hurt and how did they get hurt? That's what I'm looking for. Okay? Not a definition of a type 1 error or a definition of type 2 error, but who gets hurt. And that's only one of them is going to be relevant. You have to decide. Okay. Sample size. What should you be thinking about sample size problems? To decide if the sample size is large enough. What's the first thing you should think about? And we've talked about this before, but it's been a little while. Maybe 30, maybe not 30. 30 may have nothing to do with this problem. I'm not telling you, but it's 50-50 actually. Okay. The first thing you should do is decide what the survey question is. Not the hypothesis, but if it's a person, for example, what are you going to ask that person? and what kind of answer is the person going to give you. If the person is going to give you a yes or no answer, then 30 is a wrong number to think about. What's the number to think about if the person's going to give a yes/no answer? Yeah, that's 5. That's the NP and NQ, the number of yeses and the number of no's that are expected must be greater than 5. So 30 is only when the answer is a number answer, quantitative, to the survey question. Okay. And then question 4, practice the midterm problem. You know what it looks like. You know what I expect, and you must do something very similar to that. Okay. Also, I showed you examples when I did the webinar. It's there also. Number 5 is a little up for grabs. That's a little harder to know specifically what to ask, but you can practice some questions. Number 6, confidence interval question. They're all kind of similar. I mean, some are proportions, some are means, but they're kind of similar. Make sure you know the process of confidence intervals. Okay, hypothesis test again. Alternative hypothesis, test statistic p-value. State your conclusion. You should know the first 2 words on that. Hopefully you all know now, since I already asked you once. What's the first 2 words on state your conclusion? The hint is Mike knows. Yeah, there is statistically. Good. Part C, interpret the p-value. What's the first word on interpret the p-value? Who remembers that? I know it's been a while since we did it, but again, there's a review. Can you remember? I don't see y'all jumping in. Okay. So the first word is if. Do you remember that? So it's kind of like if we sampled another 50 people and if it was true that whatever H naught states, but you need to write that in words in the context of the question. And if then there would be that % chance, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, and note that I've put in some examples in the discussion post for this. Okay, normality assumption, we already talked about that, same idea. It's either 30 or 5 are important numbers. Question 8, again, some of the beginning stuff. I don't get specific on that. Okay, question 9, find R and give an interpretation. Okay, find, sorry, R squared. That says R squared. Yeah, so do you remember that was pretty long? How do you get an example that works that will help you for your final? Where are you going to find an example of that? Any thoughts? Yeah, the discussion post has a nice example and where I got into it. Okay, you got to find the regression line. That's calculated work and make a prediction. Know how to do that. Interpret the slope. Again, the discussion post has an example of that. Interpret the y-intercept or state why it's not applicable. Discussion posts are good for that. So is the webinar, by the way. Okay, and that's all on YouTube. You can go, watch the webinar again. And then conduct the hypothesis test. You all better get the beginning of this right. What's H naught? Always for part E. What's H naught? Equal, but what's equal to what? It's actually always exactly the same. All H naughts have an equal, but for regression analysis, we have a very special H naught. You remember? I don't see y'all jumping in. Remember, that was rho equals 0. Rho is kind of a curvy looking P thing, and that means population correlation. Okay, what's H1? What's H1? Yeah, rho is not equal to 0. So by the way, if you don't write those down, then I know you didn't do any studying. I mean, you could put that on your note card. You could write problem number 9. Part E, let me double check, make sure I didn't change anything, but pretty sure it's still problem 9E. Yep. Okay, but then you also have to find the p-value and state the conclusion in the context of the study. Okay, number 10 and 11 are hypothesis questions. You know how to do those. And that's the whole test. So what I want to do, very last thing to do, is the secret word. It's our last secret word of the entire quarter. And let me just erase all the other stuff we used to have. Come on. There we go. So the secret word for the final webinar of the quarter is actually 2 words. It's thank you, because I want to thank you for those who stuck with it. You've had a good attitude, you're working hard, and hopefully you learned something. And I want to thank you for your good attitude. So that's the secret word for the last webinar. And remember, the secret words are important. You have to do all the secret words. If there's any that you missed, then you lose, remember, 5% of your course grade per missed secret word. Okay, and you can go to the grade book and make sure that everything has been what you think it is. Okay, if you didn't do one, then you have to write a 5 pages of notes on that webinar. So that's the secret word for this webinar, is just thank you. Because again, I want to thank you all. And an easy word to remember. This is supposed to be an easy week in terms of new stuff. Hard in terms of studying for the final. So let me stop the share. And let me ask you if there's any questions about anything before we say goodbye. And this is the first time I've done this in a very long time. This is how I'm going home today. I don't know if you know, Jeremy, I think you're Tahoe, so you know. We have gotten more snow in this one storm than all the snow we've gotten all season combined. Still not much because we had so little in the combined season, but feet and feet of snow. I'm actually surprised the college is even open. So that was another issue. We actually closed down this morning. But fortunately, my electricity didn't go down. I was still able to answer questions and stuff like that. Okay, yeah, real happy to have snow because we just haven't had it this year. It's been awful. But now we got it. And the bad news is all the ski resorts are closed. So don't come up here to go skiing, or just about all of them are closed. So I'm a backcountry skier. So any questions at all about anything from the class, from the final, anything else? Before we say goodbye. Okay, all right. See ya, Jeremy. Thanks a lot for participating and working hard. Cal and Mike, any questions? Okay, thank you, Cal. Thanks for your really good attitude throughout the whole class. And Mike, thank you also. And I think I'll say goodnight to everybody. Thank you all for the whole quarter. And again, do your best to practice for this final exam so you do well. I want everyone to do well. and make sure you contact your proctor to make sure they're still open, because in this day and age, what's happened with coronavirus, a lot of places are closed. So don't just assume that your proctor is going to be able to help you. So make sure you get that guarantee. And you might even want to take it a little bit early because things could close without you knowing it. So until the final, I wish you good luck. I'll be checking the Q&A form often. And the projects I'll grade in the next 3 or 4 days probably. I've been panicked trying to get all my finals written because our face-to-face finals have to be this week, and they were originally last week. So sorry if it's going to take an extra few days to grade your papers, but I'll do my best. So until then, have a great one. Thank you very much.